Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 1387, somewhere in the rolling hills of Normandy. The air is thick with the scent of damp wool, wood smoke, and yesterday's stew, still clinging to the rushes on the floor. Your back aches. Not from battle, not from a lance piercing your ribs, but from sleeping on a straw-stuffed mattress that's long since lost its loft. You shift, and the chainmail you never fully removed the night before grinds against your tunic, rustling like dry leaves in a forgotten attic. You are a knight, not a legendary one. No songs will be sung about you at court, no tapestries woven in your honor. You are Sir Guillaume de Lormont, a man of middling rank, sworn to a minor baron whose lands stretch no farther than a day's ride on a tired horse. And it is, by all accounts, a peaceful year. No war rages across the countryside. The 100 Years' War still simmers, but the English are preoccupied elsewhere. Locally, the roads are safe enough for merchants to travel, the harvest was adequate, and even the wolves have stayed deep in the forest. Peace. And yet, you feel a gnawing unease, a quiet dread that has nothing to do with arrows or siege engines. Because peace, for a knight, is not relief. It is a slow erosion. Let's begin with the armor. You haven't worn your full plate in months, only the hauberk, that knee-length shirt of interlocking iron rings when you ride out to inspect the fields or attend your lord's court. But even that is heavy. 25 pounds of cold metal worn over a padded gambeson that traps sweat against your skin even in autumn. You've grown used to the weight, but your shoulders haven't. Every morning, you massage the knots there with fingers calloused from sword practice that no one watches anymore. Your sword hangs by the bedpost. Not because you fear thieves, your manor house is modest but secure, but because it is part of your identity. To be without it is to be less than yourself. And yet, you haven't drawn it in anger for over a year. The last time was during a border skirmish with a rival lord over a disputed mill stream. 3 men died. You killed 1. You remember the way his breath hitched, how his eyes widened not in fear but in surprise, as if death were an unexpected guest at a quiet dinner. You haven't spoken of it since. Now, your days are filled with duties that feel like theatre. You preside over petty disputes between peasants, who stole whose chicken, whose pig rooted in whose garden. You listen, nod gravely, and impose fines that go straight to your lord's coffers. The peasants bow, but their eyes are flat. They know you're just a man in metal clothes, playing at justice. Your income comes from land, about 300 acres granted to you in return for military service. But with no war, your lord sees little need to call upon your sword. Instead, he demands more administrative labor, inventorying grain stores, collecting rents, ensuring the miller isn't skimming flour. You were trained to charge a line of pikemen, not to haggle with a sullen serf over a bushel of rye. And then there's the cost. Oh, the cost. Knighthood is not a profession. It's a financial trap disguised as honor. Your armor alone cost the equivalent of 10 years' wages for a skilled mason. Your warhorse, now grazing lazily in the paddock, ate more in a week than a peasant family consumed in a month. Even your surcoat, embroidered with your family's faded crest, must be cleaned, mended, and replaced when the colors bleed from too many washings. You have no war to justify these expenses, no plunder to recoup your losses, no ransom to earn from a captured noble. In wartime, a knight could grow rich, or at least break even. In peace, you bleed coin slowly, like a wound that won't clot. Your wife, Isabeau, manages the household with quiet efficiency. She spins wool, oversees the kitchen garden, and teaches your daughters their letters, though they'll likely never use them beyond keeping accounts. She hasn't complained, not once, but you see the way she counts the candles before lighting them, how she stretches a single chicken into 3 meals. She knows, as you do, that your status is a gilded cage. If your income falters, you'll be forced to sell land, or worse, take service as a mercenary, a fate considered dishonorable for a man of your rank. Outside, the morning mist lifts, a cock crows, somewhere, a cow lows. The world moves on, indifferent to your existential crisis. You are trained for violence, shaped by violence, defined by violence, and yet, violence has abandoned you. You are a weapon with no war. You rise, pull on your boots leather cracked from disuse, and step into the courtyard. Your squire, a boy of 14 named Etienne, is already there, polishing your spurs with vinegar and sand. He looks up, hopeful. "Shall we practice today, my lord?" You hesitate. Practice for what? There's no tournament for months, no enemy to face. And yet, if you stop training, your body will soften, your reflexes dull. You'll become what the younger knights whisper about behind their gauntlets. A relic. Yes, you say, but quietly. As you strap on your practice sword, you wonder, is this what knighthood has become? Not glory, not duty, but maintenance. The endless upkeep of a role no one needs. And if peace continues, what happens to you? The practice yard is cold, even at mid-morning. Dew still clings to the wooden posts of the quintain, that spinning arm with a sandbag on one end and a shield on the other. You've struck it 1,000 times, but today your swing feels clumsy. Your shoulder protests. Etienne watches, silent, holding your real sword in its scabbard like a sacred object. You adjust your grip, exhale, and strike again. The bag swings around and thuds into your back, harder than expected. You stumble forward, catching yourself on the dirt. Etienne flinches but says nothing. Good boy. He knows better than to offer help unless asked. This is the quiet shame of peace. Your body betrays you before your mind does. In war, exhaustion was noble. A limp meant you'd ridden through the night. A scar proved you'd stood your ground. But here, in this endless autumn of calm, every ache is a sign of decline. You're not wounded, you're softening. And softness, for a knight, is a kind of death. After practice, you wash at the trough behind the hall. The water is icy, drawn from the well before dawn by the kitchen maids. You splash it on your face and feel the stubble on your jaw. Shaving is a luxury you've forgone this week, another small surrender. Your beard is patchy anyway, more grey than brown now. You're only 39, but the years wear heavier on men who live by the sword. Back inside, the steward awaits with ledgers. His name is Master Renard, a thin man with ink-stained fingers and the patience of a spider. He bows, not deeply enough to show respect, not enough to flatter. My lord, he says, the miller reports a shortfall in flour tithes. He claims the stones wore uneven. You sigh. Did he offer proof? He brought a sample, coarse, but usable. Then he's skimming. Again, you rub your temples. This is not why you took vows. You swore oaths of loyalty, of courage, of protection. Not to audit grain yields, but your lord expects results. And if you fail to deliver, he'll replace you with someone hungrier, younger, less burdened by scruples. Later, you ride out to inspect the mill. The path is muddy from last night's rain, and your horse, no longer the fiery destrier of your youth, but a steady gelding named Bayard, plods with resigned patience. The peasants you pass doff their caps, but their greetings are perfunctory. They don't fear you anymore. Why would they? You haven't enforced a punishment in months. The last time you ordered a flogging was over a stolen lamb, and even then, you commuted it to extra labor after seeing the thief's hollow cheeks. At the mill, the air hums with the grind of stone on grain. The miller, a man named Gervais, greets you with a bow that's just a hair too slow. His hands are flour-dusted, his apron clean, too clean for a man who works the stones daily. You ask to see the ledger. He produces it, but the entries are neat, almost elegant, suspiciously so. You don't accuse him outright. That would be rash. Instead, you nod, thank him, and leave. But as you ride back, you know he's keeping a portion of the flour for himself, selling it in the next village under false pretenses. It's a small crime, but it chips away at the order you're supposed to uphold. And yet, what can you do? If you expose him, the village loses its miller. If you ignore him, your lord loses revenue. Either way, you lose. That evening, over a supper of pottage and salted pork, Isabeau asks if you'll attend the upcoming feast at the Baron's castle. They say the Duke of Burgundy's envoy will be there, she adds, stirring her spoon slowly. You grunt. Feasts are another burden of peace. In wartime, banquets were rare, reserved for victories or alliances. Now, they're social obligations, elaborate displays of wealth you can ill afford. You'll need a new tunic at least. And wine. Always wine. To arrive with only ale would mark you as poor, and poverty is the true disgrace in noble circles. I'll go, you say, but we'll have to sell 2 ewes. She doesn't argue. She never does, but you see the flicker in her eyes. The calculation of what 2 fewer sheep means for winter wool, for spring lambs, for the thin broth that stretches through Lent. The next morning, a messenger arrives from your lord, not a summons to arms, but an invitation to serve on a commission, settling a boundary dispute between 2 neighboring manors. It's tedious work, walking fields with surveyors, listening to old men argue over hedgerows planted before they were born. But it's also a test. If you perform well, you might be granted a small parcel of disputed land as reward. If you fail, you'll be sidelined further. You accept, of course. What choice do you have? As you prepare for the journey, Etienne helps you pack. He's quiet, but you catch him glancing at your sword again. Do you think there'll be trouble, my lord? He asks, trying to sound casual. Trouble? You almost laugh. No, just men arguing over dirt. He looks disappointed, and you understand why. To him, knighthood is still glorious. He dreams of jousting, of rescuing maidens, of standing beside kings. He doesn't yet know that most of your life is spent in rooms that smell of mildew and ink, making decisions that please no one. You want to tell him the truth, that honor is not in the clash of steel, but in showing up when no one is watching, in doing the dull work no one applauds. But you say nothing. Let him keep his illusions a little longer. They'll be stripped away soon enough. Days pass in a blur of walking, listening, measuring. You sleep in cold barns, eat bread so hard it must be soaked in broth, and listen to the same arguments repeated in different words. One farmer claims a stream shifted, another insists the boundary stone was moved. No one has proof, only memory. And memory, you've learned, is as malleable as wet clay. At night, you lie awake, listening to the wind in the thatch. You think of your father, also a knight, who died not in battle but of fever after a wet campaign in Flanders. He left you this land, this title, this weight. Did he ever feel this useless? Back home, the first frost arrives. The fields lie fallow, the peasants store their tools. And you, what do you store? Not grain, not gold, only time. And time, in peace, is the heaviest burden of all. Because without war, without crisis, without clear enemies or righteous causes, your purpose dissolves like mist in morning sun. You are still a knight. But what does that mean when there's nothing left to fight for? Winter settles over Normandy like a heavy blanket. The rivers slow, the roads turn to mud, then to ice. Inside your hall, the fire crackles. Low wood is rationed now, as is everything else. You sit at the high table, mending a tear in your surcoat with clumsy stitches. Isabeau reads aloud from a borrowed psalter, her voice soft, rhythmic, a lullaby for adults. Outside, the wind moans through the eaves, and somewhere in the village, a dog barks once, then falls silent. Peace has not ended. If anything, it has deepened, grown roots in the frozen earth. And with it, your quiet crisis has matured into something quieter still. Acceptance. You've stopped dreaming of battle, not because you've forgotten the thrill of the charge or the clarity of combat, but because you've begun to see that knighthood was never truly about war. It was always about service, however imperfect, however mundane. The oaths you swore at your dubbing ceremony didn't specify how you were to serve, only that you must. And so, you serve. Not with a lance, but with ledgers. Not with a banner, but with patience. You attended the feast at the Baron's castle. You wore your best tunic, drank your share of wine watered. You noticed, though no one admitted it, and listened to the envoy from Burgundy speak of alliances and tariffs. No one asked about your sword, no one cared. But you held your seat with dignity, and that, you realize, is its own kind of courage. The boundary dispute was settled, not fairly perhaps, but peacefully. You awarded the contested strip of land to the older claimant, reasoning that stability mattered more than precision. Neither side was happy, but neither drew steel. That, too, feels like a victory now. Etienne has begun training with the steward's son in basic arithmetic. A knight must know numbers as well as blades, you told him, and he accepted it without question. You see yourself in him less now, not as a mirror, but as a foundation. He will be different. Perhaps he'll become a castellan, or a royal clerk. Perhaps he'll never wear full plate. And that's all right. The world is changing. Armies are filling with professional soldiers, paid in coin rather than land. Cannons are beginning to rumble on distant battlefields, making castles, and the knights who garrisoned them, obsolete. You don't resent this. Not anymore. There's a strange relief in knowing your role is fading. It means the world no longer needs men like you to keep it from tearing itself apart. That, in its own way, is peace worth having. One afternoon in late February, you ride out alone to the ridge overlooking your lands. The snow has melted in patches, revealing the dark soil beneath. Crows pick at something in a fallow field, perhaps a dead hare, perhaps nothing at all. You sit on your horse and breathe. The air is sharp, clean. For the first time in months, your mind is quiet. You think of the peasants who bow when you pass. You think of the miller who cheats, but keeps the mill running. You think of your daughters, learning to read by candlelight. None of them need a hero. They need a man who shows up, who listens, who endures. And that, you realize, is what knighthood truly was. Not glory, not violence, but endurance. The willingness to bear the weight of expectation, even when it chafes, even when no one notices. Years later, historians will barely mention men like you. Chroniclers will write of kings and battles, of treaties signed in marble halls. Your name will appear, if at all, in a land grant or a tax roll, reduced to ink on parchment. But your life, the daily decisions, the quiet compromises, the stubborn maintenance of order in a world that prefers chaos, that is the unseen architecture of history. Modern life has no place for knights, but it still needs people who show up, who do the dull work, who choose responsibility over spectacle. You might recognize them today as teachers, nurses, civil servants, people who hold society together not with swords, but with routine, with care, with the uncelebrated labor of keeping things running. And perhaps that's the real legacy of knighthood, not the armor and museums, but the idea that duty can be its own reward, even when no one is watching. The fire in your hall has burned down to embers. Isabeau has gone to bed. The house is silent except for the ticking of a wooden clock, a recent luxury, wound each morning with quiet reverence. You blow out the candle. Shadows swallow the room. You were tired, not from battle, but from living. And yet, you are at peace. Close your eyes. Let the weight of the chainmail slip from your shoulders. Let the cold stone floor soften beneath you. Let the echoes of hooves, of clashing steel, of oaths sworn in torchlight, all fade into the hush of a winter night. You were never meant to be remembered. You were only meant to endure. And you did. Sleep now. The world can wait until morning. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 130 Métis CE, deep beneath the vaulted arches of the baths of Trajan in Rome. The air is already thick, damp, warm, and layered with the smells of sweat, olive oil, sulfur, and something faintly metallic, like old coins left in a damp drawer. Your back is stiff from sleeping curled on a thin mat in a narrow alcove near the furnace room. And your hands, calloused, cracked, and permanently stained with soot, clench reflexively as you sit up. You are not a citizen. You are not free. You are Felix, a slave owned by the imperial household, assigned to the balneatories, the corps of attendants who keep the baths running from dawn until the last senator has scraped the grime from his skin and gone home to his villa on the Palatine. You were 32, though you look older. Time moves differently when you own none of it. The baths are not just a place to wash, they are the beating heart of Roman public life, a theatre of gossip, politics, business, and leisure. But you never see the grand marble halls, the mosaics glittering under skylights, the fountains spouting perfumed water. You live in the bowels of the building, where the heat is unbearable in summer, and the damp never lifts in winter. Your world is brick, steam, and the endless cycle of cleaning, stoking, scrubbing, and emptying. Your day begins before sunrise. You rise, splash your face with cold water from a chipped basin, and pull on your tunic, coarse wool, already damp from the humidity. No sandals today, the floor near the hypocaust is slick with condensation and worse. You go barefoot, as always, your soles toughened into leather. The first task is the furnace. The Profernium must be fed constantly to keep the underfloor heating system, the hypocaust, running. You shovel coal and wood into the maw of the firebox, your arms moving in a rhythm so ingrained it feels like breathing. Sweat pours down your spine, stings your eyes. The heat is oppressive, but you don't complain. Complaints are luxuries for free men. By the time the first bathers arrive, usually clerks and shopkeepers, eager to wash before the elite descend, the water in the caldarium must be hot, the floors of the tepidarium warm to the touch, the mirrors in the dressing rooms polished. You and your fellow slaves move like ghosts through service corridors, unseen but essential. If a senator slips on a wet tile, it's your fault. If the water is too cool, you'll be whipped. If a nobleman's strigil, A curved metal scraper used to remove oil and dead skin goes missing, you'll be questioned for hours. You've learned to move silently, to anticipate needs before they're spoken. You know which patrons like their towels folded a certain way, which ones tip a bronze as for extra attention, which ones will backhand you if you look them in the eye. You keep your gaze low, your hands quick, your mouth shut. At mid-morning, you're assigned to scrub the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. The tiles are slick with algae and soap scum. You kneel, dip your brush in vinegar and ash, and begin. Your knees ache. They always ache. But you don't stop. Stopping means falling behind. Falling behind means punishment, or worse, being reassigned to the latrines, where the stench is so thick it coats your tongue. As you work, you overhear fragments of conversation drifting from the main hall. A merchant boasts of a new shipment from Alexandria. A young lawyer practices his oratory on a friend. Two women whisper about a scandal involving a Vestal virgin. You listen, not out of curiosity, but because information is currency. Knowing who is rising, who is falling, who owes whom, this knowledge might one day buy you a favor, a lighter duty, even manumission. But that's a distant dream. Most slaves in the imperial baths never earn their freedom. You're more likely to die of lung disease from the furnace smoke, or slip and break your neck on the wet steps. Still, you hold the thought lightly, like a coin hidden in your tunic, just enough to keep you going. Lunch is a bowl of barley porridge and a scrap of salted fish, eaten crouched in the corridor. You eat quickly. There's no time for rest. After lunch, you refill oil jars, replace broken tiles, and haul away buckets of used water-grey, oily, reeking of human skin. Your arms tremble, but you keep moving. Movement is survival. By late afternoon, the elite arrive. Senators in white togas, their rings glinting, their voices loud with wine and power. You clean around them like a shadow. One drops a towel. You pick it up without being asked. He doesn't thank you. Why would he? You're furniture, less than furniture. You're part of the plumbing. As dusk falls, the baths empty. The last echoes of laughter fade. Now comes the deep clean, scrubbing the pools, draining the systems, checking the furnace for the night shift. You work until your vision blurs. Only then are you allowed to return to your alcove, to your thin mat, to a few hours of fitful sleep before it all begins again. You lie down, your body humming with exhaustion. The furnace still glows faintly through the wall, casting a dull orange light. Somewhere above, a night watchman walks the marble halls, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. You close your eyes and wonder, is this all there is? To be a body that serves other bodies, forever unseen, unthanked, unmourned. And if you vanished tomorrow, would anyone notice the baths ran colder? The weeks blur into months, marked only by the changing quality of the light through the high ventilation slits and the shifting scents that drift down from the public halls. In spring, the air carries the sweetness of flowering gardens from the Esquiline Hill in summer. The stench of the Tiber at low tide seeps in like a slow poison. Autumn brings wood smoke and the tang of fermenting grapes from the city's vintners. Winter is the worst, damp cold that settles into your bones and never leaves, no matter how close you huddle to the furnace. You've learned to read the moods of the baths like a farmer reads the sky. When the grain ships arrive late from Egypt, the patrons are irritable, their tips smaller, their tempers shorter. When the emperor hosts games in the Colosseum, the baths empty for days. Everyone is at the arena, watching blood spill for entertainment. But when political rumors swirl, when a general returns from the frontier or a senator falls from favor, The baths swell with nervous energy. That's when you must be most careful. A misplaced word overheard, a glance held too long. It could be twisted into conspiracy. Slaves have been executed for less. Your only real companion is a fellow slave named Lupa, a woman assigned to the women's section. She's older, with a scar across her left eyebrow and a dry wit that rarely surfaces above a whisper. You exchange nods in the supply corridors, sometimes a scrap of bread if one of you has extra. Once, during a rare lull, she told you she'd been a weaver in Gaul before being captured in a border raid. "Now I scrub the backs of women who've never held a spindle," she said, her voice flat. "The gods have a sense of humor. You don't speak of freedom often. It's too dangerous to dwell on. But sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the furnace is banked low and the building groans like a sleeping beast, you allow yourself to imagine it. Not grand manumission with a bronze tablet and a new name, just quiet release. A small room near the Subura, a job mending sandals, the right to walk down a street without flinching at every shout. But dreams are heavy things. They weigh you down during the day, make your hands slower, your mind distracted. And distraction in the baths can be fatal. Last month, a young slave named Decimus dropped a jar of expensive Syrian oil in the men's dressing room. The patron, a minor magistrate, beat him so badly he couldn't stand for a week. Decimus was sold the next day to a mine in Spain. You never saw him again. You've become expert at invisibility. You move through the grand halls like a draft of air, present but unnoticed. You know how to time your entrances so you appear only when needed, how to fade into the marble columns when voices rise in anger or intimacy. You've memorized the floor plans, the hidden passages, the loose tile near the cold plunge that squeaks if stepped on. This knowledge is your armor. Yet, invisibility has its costs. You've forgotten the sound of your own voice. When you do speak, to request a replacement brush, to report a leak, you're startled by how rough it sounds, how unused. Your name, Felix, feels foreign on your tongue. It means fortunate. The irony isn't lost on you. Occasionally, a bather will treat you like a person. An old scholar once asked your opinion on the temperature of the warm room. A matron once handed you a copper coin and said, "You work hard." These moments are rare, but you hoard them like relics. They remind you that you are still human, even if the law says otherwise. The imperial household owns you, which is both a blessing and a curse. You're less likely to be sold on a whim than a privately owned slave, but you're also trapped in a vast, impersonal machine. There's no single master to impress, no path to favor through loyalty or cleverness. You are a cog in an empire that spans 3 continents, and cogs don't get rewarded, they get replaced. Still, you adapt. You've learned to stretch your rations by trading with the kitchen slaves barley for onion skins, which you boil into a thin broth. You fashioned a small comb from a broken tile to keep your hair from matting. You've even managed to save 3 copper asses hidden in a crack behind the furnace brick. A pathetic sum, but enough to buy a loaf of bread if you're ever separated from your ration. Your body is a map of your labor. Your hands are permanently stained with lime and ash. Your shoulders are hunched from carrying buckets. Your lungs burn on damp days from years of furnace smoke. Yet, you are healthier than many. The baths provide clean water, and your constant movement keeps your muscles strong. You've seen slaves in bakeries or quarries waste away in half the time. But health is not happiness, and survival is not life. One afternoon, while cleaning a discarded strigil, you find a tiny chip of lapis lazuli embedded in the metal, likely from a nobleman's ring. It's no bigger than a grain of wheat, but it glows like a fragment of midnight sky. You pocket it. Not to sell, you'd be accused of theft, but to hold. On the worst nights, you roll it between your fingers, feeling its cool smoothness, imagining a world where beauty belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford to leave it behind in a bathhouse. As the year turns, rumors spread that the Emperor Hadrian plans to build new baths, larger, more opulent. Some slaves whisper this means more work. Others hope it means new positions, perhaps even a chance to serve in a cleaner, brighter wing. You say nothing. You've learned that hope, like oil, must be rationed. That evening, as you haul a sack of wet linens to the laundry yard, you pass a group of boys playing knucklebones in the street. They shout, laugh, shove each other free in a way you can no longer remember. You watch them for a moment too long. One notices you and makes a face, mimicking your hunched posture. The others laugh. You keep walking, you don't look back. But inside, something tightens. Not anger, not despair. Something quieter. The ache of a question you can't voice. If a man is never seen, does he still exist? Years pass. The baths of Trajan still stand, though cracks have begun to spiderweb across the frescoes in the apoditerium, the dressing room. The marble floors, once polished to a mirror sheen, now show the wear of 1,000,000 bare feet. And you, Felix, are still here, though your hair is more grey than black, and your knees crack like dry kindling when you kneel to scrub. But something has shifted. Not in the world, Rome still thrums with the same rhythms of power, pleasure, and indifference. But in you. You no longer count the days. You no longer hoard hope like a secret coin. Instead, you found a different kind of dignity. The dignity of endurance, of presence, of doing your work well even when no one sees. You've come to understand that invisibility is not the same as insignificance. The baths would collapse within a week without you and the others like you. The stokers, the scrubbers, the haulers of water and waste. You are the unseen sinews that hold this monument of civilization together. And in that realization, there is a quiet kind of freedom. You've stopped dreaming of manumission. Not because it's impossible, some slaves do earn it, through decades of service or a rare act of imperial generosity, but because you've begun to see that freedom isn't only a legal status, it's also a state of mind. You cannot control your body's ownership, but you can guard your inner self. You can choose, in small ways, how you move through your day. You can refuse to let bitterness harden your heart. You can offer a nod to Lupa when she looks weary. You can take an extra moment to rinse a child's dropped toy before returning it. These are not grand acts. They leave no mark on history. But they are yours. One winter morning, a new slave arrives, a boy of 12, trembling, eyes wide with terror. He's been assigned to assist you in the furnace room. His name is Marcus, and he doesn't know how to hold a shovel without dropping it. You say nothing at first, but when the overseer turns his back, you show him how to brace his feet on the slick floor, how to angle the coal so it burns evenly. You don't speak much. You just do the work beside him, slowly, deliberately, until his movements begin to mimic yours. Later, he whispers, "Why are you helping me?" You pause. The furnace roars behind you, casting long shadows on the brick wall. "Because someone once showed me," you say. It's not entirely true. No one ever taught you gently, but it feels true now. And that's enough. This is how knowledge survives in a world that doesn't value you. Passed hand to hand, word to word, in the spaces between commands. The empire will not remember you. No historian will record your name. Centuries from now, archaeologists will marvel at the engineering of the Hypocaust, the artistry of the mosaics, the scale of Roman leisure, but they'll find no trace of the hands that kept it all running. Your bones, if they survive at all, will be indistinguishable from those of beggars and criminals in a common pit. Yet, you mattered. Because civilization is not built only by emperors and architects. It is maintained, hour by hour, bucket by bucket, by those who show up in the dark, who scrub the grime from the glory, who carry the weight so others can pretend it doesn't exist. In our own time, we still rely on invisible labor. The janitors who clean our offices at night, the sanitation workers who haul away our waste before dawn, the data entry clerks, the warehouse packers, the kitchen staff in luxury hotels. People whose work makes modern life possible, but who remain unseen, unthanked, underpaid. Like you, they endure. Like you, they persist, not for fame, but because someone must. And in that quiet persistence lies a form of courage far more common, and perhaps more essential, than the heroism of battle or discovery. One evening, as you prepare to bank the furnace for the night, you find the chip of lapis lazuli still in your tunic pocket. You hold it in your palm, feeling its cool weight. Then, on impulse, you press it into the wet mortar between two bricks near the firebox, just out of sight, just within reach if someone were to look closely. It's not a message. It's not a monument. It's simply a mark. I was here. You don't expect anyone to find it, but the act itself feels like a kind of prayer. The baths grow quiet. The last echoes fade. You blow out your oil lamp and walk back to your alcove, your footsteps soft on the stone. You lie down. The furnace hums like a distant heartbeat. Somewhere above, the stars wheel across the Roman sky, indifferent to empires, to slaves, to the slow turning of human lives. You close your eyes. Let the steam rise. Let the tiles gleam. Let the senators come and go, believing the world bends to their will. You know the truth. It is held up by hands like yours. Sleep now. You have earned your rest. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 1637, in a garret room tucked beneath the eaves of a leaning tenement on the Rue Saint-Denis in Paris. The air is thick with the smell of damp plaster, stale bread, and the faint, greasy tang of tallow smoke from last night's guttering candle. Your stomach growls, not the gentle rumble of morning hunger, but a sharp, insistent ache that has been your constant companion for weeks. You are not sick. You are simply poor. And in Paris, poverty doesn't just mean discomfort. It means a daily negotiation with hunger so precise, so exhausting, that eating itself becomes a luxury you can rarely afford. You are Marie Lefebvre, a widow of 34, with 2 children, Pierre, age 8, and Claudette, 5, who sleep curled together on a straw pallet in the corner, their breathing shallow, their cheeks hollow. Your husband, a journeyman printer, died last winter of a fever that swept through the quartier like a thief. Since then, you've taken in mending, scrubbed floors for a glove maker, and sold buttons from a tray on market days. But wages are low, rents are high, and bread, oh bread, is everything. You sit up slowly, your joints stiff from the cold. The single window is frosted over, but you can hear the city waking below. The clatter of cartwheels on cobblestones, the cries of milk vendors, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Paris never truly sleeps, but it doesn't feed everyone equally. Your first task is to check the bread box. You lift the lid with a kind of ritual dread. Inside lies half a loaf of pain bourgeois, a coarse greyish bread made from rye and bran, the cheapest legally permitted under the royal assize of bread, a strict regulation that fixes bread prices based on grain costs. Even this loaf cost you 2 sous yesterday, nearly a third of your day's earnings. You break off a small piece, no larger than your thumb, and chew it slowly, letting the dry crumbs dissolve on your tongue. You give the rest to the children when they wake. But here's the cruel paradox of 17th century Paris. Food is everywhere, and yet, for people like you, it might as well be locked behind glass. Walk down to Les Salles, the great central market, and you'll see mountains of cheese, wheels of butter, strings of sausages, baskets of apples, barrels of salted fish. But these are not for you. The price of a single egg equals a day's wage for a laundress. A pound of beef. Unthinkable. Even cabbage, when in season, can cost more than you can spare after paying rent and tithes to the parish. And then there's the bread itself. Paris runs on bread. The average laborer eats 2 to 3 pounds of it a day, but the price fluctuates wildly with the harvest. In a good year, wheat is plentiful, and the pain de seigle bread is cheap and filling. In a bad year, like the one looming now, after a wet summer ruined the crops, the price soars. Bakers, bound by the asaz, are forced to make smaller loaves or switch to inferior grains like barley or even ground acorns. Rumors already whisper of mystery flour mixed with sawdust or chalk. You've learned to read the signs. When the baker's ovens smoke late into the night, it means extra batches are being baked to meet demand, and prices will rise by dawn. When women gather in angry clusters outside the Hôtel de Ville, it means the city has failed to secure grain shipments from Normandy or the Loire Valley. And when the watch patrols the bakeries with halberds, it means riots are coming. You dress quickly in your one good dress, patched at the elbows, faded to the color of dishwater, and tie a scarf over your hair. You have 3 sous left, enough for a quarter loaf, maybe a handful of turnips if you're lucky. But first, you must stand in line. The nearest bakery opens at 6. By 5:30, a queue already snakes around the block. Women mostly, with baskets on their arms and infants strapped to their backs. No one speaks much. There's a grim camaraderie in the silence. You all know the rules. Pushing means getting shoved back. Complaining means being skipped. And if you faint from hunger, someone will drag you aside, but the line won't stop. You take your place at the end. The cobblestones are icy under your thin shoes. Your feet ache within minutes. But you don't shift your weight too much. You've seen women lose their place for stepping out to relieve themselves. You clench your jaw against the gnawing in your belly and watch the sky lighten from indigo to grey. When the bakery door finally opens, the crowd surges forward, not violently, but with a collective urgency that feels like a held breath released. You clutch your coins tightly. The baker, a man with flour in his eyebrows and a permanent scowl, works quickly. 2 sous for the small rye. No credit. No complaints. You hand over the coins. He slaps a loaf into your hands, smaller than yesterday's. You don't argue. Arguing gets you blacklisted. Back in your room, you divide the bread. 1/3 for each child, 1/3 for you. Claudette eats hers in 3 bites. Pierre saves half, tucking it into his pocket for later. You know he'll give it to his sister when you're not looking. As you sip weak chicory water, real coffee is for the nobility. You stare at the wall and wonder, how is it possible to live in a city bursting with food and still feel like you're starving? And more terrifyingly, what happens when the bread runs out completely? The days grow shorter, and the price of bread climbs like a vine choking a trellis. By late October, your 3 sous no longer buys even a quarter loaf. Now you must spend 4/2 your daily earnings just to keep your children from crying through the night. You've stopped eating breakfast. Sometimes, you skip dinner entirely, telling the children you ate at Madame Dubois's while mending her linens. They believe you, or perhaps they pretend to, out of kindness. You've begun to notice the signs of hunger in yourself, the trembling hands, the dizziness when you stand too quickly, the way your thoughts slow like a clock running down. But worse is the shame. In Paris, poverty is not just hardship, it's moral failure. The church preaches charity, but the parish priest eyes your patched dress with thinly veiled disapproval. God helps those who help themselves, he told you last week when you asked for a sack of barley from the poor box. You left without it. You've tried everything. You sold your husband's printing tools, his pride, his livelihood, for a pittance. You pawned your wedding ring, a thin band of copper that had turned green at the edges. You even stood in line at the Hôtel Dieu, the city's ancient hospital, hoping for a bowl of gruel. But they turned you away. No fever, no entry. The sick get fed, the merely hungry do not. Now you do what every desperate Parisian does. You stretch food through alchemy of scarcity. You soak stale bread in water until it swells, then boil it with a single onion peel for flavor. You collect fallen chestnuts from the street, roast them over a single coal, and grind them into a bitter flour. You trade mending for a neighbor's sour milk, which you curdle into a thin cheese. Nothing is wasted. Not a bone, not a rind, not a drop of fat skimmed from another woman's stew pot. And still, it's not enough. One afternoon, while scrubbing floors in the Marais district, you overhear 2 bourgeois women discussing the latest royal banquet at the Louvre. They served pheasants stuffed with truffles, one says, fanning herself, and ice cream, brought from the Alps in salted wagons à la juste délai. You keep your eyes on the tiles, your hands moving mechanically, but your stomach clenches like a fist. Ice cream. In October, while your daughter licks her fingers after eating a boiled turnip, hoping to taste butter that isn't there. The injustice doesn't burn. It numbs. You've stopped imagining a different life. Now you only calculate. How many hours of scrubbing for one egg? How many buttons sewn for a cup of lentils? Then, in early November, the rumors become reality. A ship carrying wheat from Brittany sinks off the coast of Normandy. Grain stocks in Paris plummet. The price of bread doubles overnight. Panic spreads faster than plague. Overnight, the orderly queues outside bakeries dissolve into shoving matches. Women scream. Men, usually absent from bread lines, appear, their faces hard, shouldering women aside. The city watch is doubled, but they're overwhelmed. You see a baker's window smashed, loaves snatched from the counter by desperate hands. The next day, that bakery is shuttered, its owner hiding behind barred doors. You stop going to your usual bakery. Instead, you walk farther, to the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, where the lines are longer but the bakers are kinder. It takes you 2 hours round trip. You leave the children locked in the room with a pot of boiled water and strict instructions not to open the door. Claudette cries when you leave. Pierre promises to be brave. You kiss them both and walk away with your heart in your throat. One morning, you return to find Pierre pale and shivering. He ate snow off the windowsill, he confesses, because his stomach hurt. You hold him close, rocking back and forth, whispering nonsense words to calm him. There's no money for a physician, no herbs for fever. All you have is your body heat and your voice. That night, you make a decision. You go to the market before dawn and sell your hair. Not all of it, just enough. A wigmaker's apprentice pays you 6 sous for a thick braid, cut just above the nape. It's not fashionable hair, too coarse, too dark, but it's usable for padding and cheaper wigs. You don't look in the mirror afterward. You can't bear to see yourself diminished. With the 6 sous, you buy a full loaf, a small wheel of cheese, and a handful of dried peas. That evening, you cook a real meal thick soup with peas and bread soaked in broth, a sliver of cheese for each child. They eat in silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. When Claudette licks her bowl clean, she looks up and says, "Maman, are we rich now?" You almost laugh, almost cry. "Just for tonight, ma petite," you whisper. Just for tonight. But the reprieve is brief. Within days, the price of peas triples. The cheese disappears from market stalls. Even turnips become scarce. The city is tightening like a noose. You begin to hear whispers of the grandes misères, the great miseries, the famines of past decades when people ate rats, leather, even grass. Old women in the queue speak of 1602, when corpses were found in alleyways with their stomachs split open, not by violence, but by the sheer pressure of emptiness. You start checking your children's gums each night, looking for the telltale sponginess of scurvy. You ration water now too, because fuel to boil it is expensive. You dream of milk. Not wine, not cake, just warm milk, plain and simple. And through it all, the city thrums on. Carriages rattle past your street carrying perfumed nobles to the theatre. Street vendors sell sugared almonds to giggling children in velvet coats. The bells of Notre Dame chime the hours, indifferent to who eats and who starves. You realize, with a quiet horror, that starvation in Paris isn't sudden. It's slow. It's polite. It wears a mask of order, of law, of divine will. No one throws you into the gutter. You simply fade, meal by missed meal, until you're too weak to stand in line. And the cruelest truth of all, you could walk into a tavern right now, sit at a table, and order a bowl of stew. But you won't, because spending your last coins on a single meal means no bread tomorrow, no rent paid, no hope. So you choose hunger, Not because there's no food, but because eating today might mean your children starve tomorrow. And that is why, in 17th century Paris, you'd starve before you'd eat. Winter arrives not with fanfare, but with a slow, suffocating grip. The Seine begins to ice at the edges. Frost etches delicate patterns on your window pane. Beautiful, useless. Inside your garret, the cold seeps through the walls like a thief, stealing warmth, strength, hope. You've stuffed rags into the cracks, wrapped the children in every scrap of cloth you own, and burned your last bits of furniture for heat. A stool leg, a broken shelf. Each flame feels like a betrayal of the future, but the present demands it. And yet, against all odds, you survive. Not because the famine ends. It doesn't. Bread remains scarce, prices remain high, and the city's granaries stay guarded like treasure vaults. But you adapt. You learn. You endure. You join a confrérie des pauvres, a neighborhood mutual aid circle, where women pool scraps and share news of charity distributions. One brings turnip tops, another sour milk, a third a few moldy apples she salvaged from a cart. Together, you boil them into a thin soup that tastes of earth and resilience. No one calls it charity. You call it making do. You also discover the hidden economy of the desperate. Behind the Hôtel de Ville, after dark, women trade in grey flour hev. And regaliated, unblessed grain sold under cloaks, ground in secret mills. It's risky, punishable by whipping if caught, but it's cheaper. You buy a handful, sift out the pebbles, and bake flat cakes that taste of dust but fill bellies. Pierre begins running errands for a fishmonger, carrying baskets, sweeping scales, in exchange for heads and bones to boil into broth. Claudette, small and quiet, sits with an elderly seamstress who pays her a sou a day to thread needles. It's not much, but it's dignity. And dignity, you've learned, is its own kind of nourishment. Then in February, a miracle of bureaucracy, the Crown, fearing unrest, authorizes an emergency grain shipment from royal reserves. The price of bread drops, not to what it was, but enough. The queues shorten, the baker's windows stay unbroken. You buy a full loaf without calculating how many hours it cost. That night, you eat until you're full. Not stuffed, just full. And it feels like grace. You don't celebrate. You don't trust it, but you allow yourself to breathe. Years later, historians will call this period a subsistence crisis. Réadrai, academic term for the daily terror of watching your children's ribs press against their skin. They'll analyze crop yields, trade policies, the inefficiencies of pre-modern logistics. But they won't capture the weight of a mother's choice. Do I eat today, or do I let my child eat tomorrow? That choice, repeated millions of times across centuries, is the silent engine of history. Not revolutions, not treaties, but the quiet calculus of survival in the face of systems that value order over people. In our own time, we've built safety nets, food stamps, school lunches, unemployment benefits. But hunger hasn't vanished. It's just quieter. It's the single parent choosing between bus fare and groceries, the college student skipping meals to pay rent, the elderly couple diluting milk to make it last. The shame hasn't changed, only the packaging. And like you, they stretch, they share, they hide their hunger behind smiles and, "I'm fine." You never become rich. You never leave the Rue Saint-Denis. But you keep your children alive. That is your victory. Not sung in ballads, not carved in stone, but real. One spring morning, years later, Claudette, now a seamstress herself, brings home a small loaf of white bread, a luxury she's saved for weeks to buy. She places it on the table with a shy smile. For you, maman. You break it slowly, deliberately, and share it with her. No calculations, no guilt, just bread and love and the quiet joy of having enough. The great famines of Paris would come again, in 1693, in 1709, each time testing the city's fragile social fabric. But for now, in this fragile piece of 1630, the great famines of Paris would come again in 1693, in 1709, each time testing the city's fragile social fabric. But for now, in this fragile piece of 1638, you sit at your table, your hands no longer trembling, and you give thanks not to God or king, but to the stubborn, uncelebrated will to endure. Outside, Paris wakes once more. Carriages clatter, vendors cry, the bells chime. The city forgets your hunger as quickly as it came. But you remember. Close your eyes now. Let the scent of bread, real, warm, unrationed, fill your dreams. Let the children sleep without hunger gnawing at their bones. Let the cold recede. You made it through. Not with glory, but with grit. Not with power, but with patience. Rest now. The line is over. You've reached the front. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 1342, in a narrow cell tucked into the eastern wing of the Abbey of Sainte-Marie-des-Bois, deep in the forests of Burgundy. The air is still and cold, scented faintly with beeswax, dried herbs, and the damp stone that never quite dries, even in summer. There is no window, only a small, high grille that lets in a sliver of grey dawn light and the distant call of a thrush. You do not stir immediately. You lie perfectly still on your straw pallet, wrapped in a thin wool blanket, listening to the silence. Not the absence of sound. No, silence in a medieval convent is never empty. It hums with the rustle of habits in distant corridors, the drip of condensation from the vaulted ceiling, the soft shuffle of bare feet on flagstone. But it is a disciplined silence, a chosen silence. And you, Sister Agnès, have lived within it for 17 years. You are 36. You entered the abbey at 19, not out of divine calling, though you tell yourself you felt one, but because your family could not afford your dowry. Marriage was closed to you, the world outside offered only servitude or shame. Here at least, you have shelter, purpose, and a name that is not tied to a man's lineage. You are no longer Agnès de Varennes, daughter of a minor knight fallen on hard times. You are Sister Agnès, bride of Christ, handmaid of the rule. You rise now, as the first bell tolls from the chapel tower. Matins, the night office, already finished by the choir nuns. You are a lay sister, not of noble birth, so you do not sing the divine office. Your vocation is labor, not liturgy. You dress quickly in your coarse black habit, cinching the rope belt tightly around your waist. The fabric scratches your skin, but you've long since stopped noticing. Sensation is a distraction, and distraction is a sin. Your cell contains only what is necessary. A pallet, a small wooden stool, a crucifix carved from olive wood, and a single book, The Imitation of Christ, its pages worn soft at the edges from nightly reading by candlelight. You own nothing else. Not a comb, not a mirror, not a keepsake from your former life. Even your hair is hidden beneath a white wimple and black veil, shaved at the crown in the tonsure of humility. You step into the corridor. The stone floor is icy under your bare feet. Other lay sisters move like shadows toward the refectory, their heads bowed, their hands tucked into wide sleeves. No one speaks. No one meets eyes. To speak outside of designated times is to break the rule of Saint Benedict, which governs your life with quiet severity. Ora et labora, pray and work, but for you is mostly labor. Breakfast is thin barley gruel, served in silence. You eat quickly, not from hunger, though you are always slightly hungry, but from habit. The refectory is vast and dim, lit only by high windows that cast long, pale rectangles on the floor. As you eat, a choir nun reads aloud from the Gospels in Latin, her voice clear and measured. You understand only fragments, enough to know it is about humility, about serving without reward. You nod inwardly. You are an expert in that. After breakfast, you report to the infirmary. This is your primary duty. You assist Sister Marguerite, the infirmarian, in caring for the sick and elderly nuns. Today, Sister Odile has a fever. You change her linens, sponge her brow with vinegar water, and brew a tisane of feverfew and willow bark. Your hands move with practiced calm, but your mind is alert. In a community sealed from the outside world, illness spreads quickly. And though the Black Death has not yet reached Burgundy, its horrors still confined to distant ports like Marseille. You've heard the rumors, ships full of corpses, entire villages abandoned. You say a silent prayer. Not here. Not yet. By mid-morning, you're in the herb garden, harvesting rosemary, sage, and hyssop under a pale winter sun. The earth is hard, your fingers numb, but you work methodically, tying bundles with twine, labeling them with chalk on slate. Every plant has a purpose. Lavender for sleep, rue for cramps, comfrey for wounds. You know their Latin names, their virtues, their dangers. This knowledge is your power, quiet, practical, uncelebrated. At noon, the great bell tolls again. Sext, the midday office. You pause your work, kneel on the frozen ground, and recite the Lord's Prayer in silence. Around you the forest holds its breath. A jay calls, wind stirs the bare branches. For a moment you feel something that is not prayer, not duty, but peace. You push it away. Peace can be a temptation too. The afternoon is spent in the laundry, scrubbing habits in icy water, your knuckles raw and red. Or in the kitchen, peeling turnips, stirring pots of pottage, baking coarse bread in the communal oven. Every task is performed in silence, every movement governed by routine. You speak only when necessary. More wood for the infirmary. The linens are dry. Sister Odile's fever has broken, and yet within this silence your mind is loud. You remember the taste of your mother's apple tart, the sound of your younger brother laughing as he chased chickens through the courtyard, the feel of grass under bare feet in summer. These memories are sins, you've been told, attachments to the world. But you cannot banish them. They rise like steam from a hidden spring, unbidden, persistent. As dusk falls, you return to your cell. You light a single candle, rationed, like everything else, and read a page of the Imitation of Christ. Then you kneel for your private prayers. You ask for strength, for obedience, for the grace to desire nothing. But deep down, in a place you do not name even to yourself, you wonder, is silence a path to God, or just a way to disappear? The weeks pass like beads on a rosary, each day identical to the last, each hour measured by bells, not sun. You rise, work, eat, pray, sleep, repeat. The rhythm is so ingrained that your body moves before your mind wakes. And yet, beneath the surface of routine, something stirs. It begins with a letter, not for you. Lay sisters do not receive correspondence, but for the abbess. A messenger arrives from Dijon, mud-spattered and weary, bearing a sealed parchment. You see it only in passing, as you carry firewood past the scriptorium. But the sight of it, wax seal intact, ink still sharp, awakens a longing so sharp it feels like pain. You haven't held a letter in 17 years. You haven't written one. To whom would you write? Your brother died in a skirmish near Auxerre 10 years ago. Your mother passed soon after. There is no one left who remembers your face as anything but veiled. Still, that night, you dream of ink, of shaping words with a quill, of writing your name, Agnès, not as a prayer, but as a declaration. You wake with your heart pounding. This is vanity. Worse, It is rebellion. The rule forbids personal expression. Your voice, your thoughts, your very identity are meant to dissolve into the collective body of the convent, like salt in water. To desire individuality is to reject the very foundation of your life. And yet, you begin to notice the small rebellions of others. Sister Claire, the youngest choir nun, hums under her breath while copying psalms, a tiny wordless melody that vanishes the moment anyone enters the scriptorium. Brother Anselm, the lay brother who tends the bees, leaves a single honeycomb on the infirmary sill each spring. No note, no explanation. Even the abbess, stern and unyielding, keeps a dried violet pressed between the pages of her breviary, a relic from her own youth. These are not acts of defiance. They are whispers of selfhood, preserved like embers in ash. You begin your own quiet resistance, not in deed, but in attention. You notice the way light falls across the cloister arcade at 3 p.m, painting golden stripes on the stone. You memorize the pattern of cracks in your cell wall, imagining them as rivers on a map to a place you'll never see. You save a single hazelnut from your evening porridge and keep it in the fold of your habit, not to eat, but to hold. Its smooth, cool weight becomes a secret anchor. Then, in early spring, Sister Odile dies. She was 82, blind for the last decade, bedridden for the last 2. You cared for her daily, feeding her spoonfuls of broth, turning her to prevent sores, reading scripture in a low voice she could no longer hear but seemed to feel in her bones. Her death is not a surprise, yet it shakes you. At her funeral, the choir nuns sing the Libera Me, with voices like silver threads. You stand at the back, as lay sisters must, your hands folded, your eyes downcast. But inside, a question forms. Will anyone sing for me? After the burial, you return to the infirmary to clean her cell. The prioress has instructed you to burn her personal effects, standard practice, to prevent attachment. But as you gather her few belongings, a wooden cup, a wool shawl, a small wooden bird carved by a long-dead novice, you find a scrap of parchment tucked beneath her mattress. It's not scripture. It's a list. Faded, written in a trembling hand. The smell of rain on hot stone. My sister's laugh. The taste of blackberries in August. The sound of the Vienne River at dusk. No name, no date, just 4 lines of memory, preserved in secret. You stare at it, your breath catching. This was her rebellion, her quiet insistence. I was here. I felt this. You should burn it. You know you should. But instead, you slip it into your sleeve. That night, by the dim light of your candle, you take out the parchment. You trace the letters with your finger. Then slowly, you add your own line at the bottom, so faint it might be mistaken for a smudge. The weight of a hazelnut in my palm. You do not sign it. You do not need to. The next morning, you return to your duties. You scrub floors, brew tisanes, kneel at the appointed hours. But something has shifted. You are still obedient, still silent, still a servant of the rule. But you are no longer trying to disappear. You are learning to exist within the silence, not as an absence, but as a presence. Spring deepens. The herb garden blooms. You teach a new lay sister how to dry chamomile without crushing the flowers. You show her how to tell when feverfew is ready to harvest, not by the calendar, but by the scent on the breeze. She listens intently, her eyes wide. You realize you are passing on knowledge that was never written down, never authorized, only lived. And in that transmission, you feel something like legacy. One afternoon, while mending habits in the sewing room, you overhear 2 choir nuns speaking in hushed tones. They say the plague has reached Avignon, one whispers. The Pope himself is said to be barricaded in his palace. Your hands still. Avignon is only 2 weeks' ride away. The silence of the convent has always been a shield, a way to separate yourselves from the chaos of the world. But now, the world is closing in, and silence may not be enough. You think of Sister Odile's list, of the hazelnut, of the boy who carved the wooden bird, long dust. You think of your own hands, wrinkled now, stained with herbs and lye, and wonder if they will be remembered for their work, or simply folded into a shroud and forgotten. That evening, during Compline, as the nuns chant the final psalm, you close your eyes and listen, not to the words, but to the spaces between them. In those silences you hear something new, not emptiness, but possibility. Because silence, you realize, is not the absence of voice. It is the space where voice might one day grow. But for now, you return to your cell. You light your candle. You wait. The plague does not come to Sainte-Marie-des-Bois that year, not in 1342, nor in 1343. But by 1348, it arrives like a shadow slipping under the abbey gates, first in the village below, then in the infirmary, then in the choir stalls. The world outside collapses into chaos, mass graves, abandoned farms, priests too terrified to administer last rites. But within the convent walls, the bells still toll. The offices are still sung. The lay sisters still scrub, brew, and mend. And you, Sister Agnès, still keep your silence. But now, that silence is no longer passive. It is active. It is armor. It is service. You work 16 hours a day in the infirmary, now overflowing with feverish nuns. You boil sheets, mix poultices of vinegar and wormwood, hold the hands of those too weak to speak. You do not flee. You do not complain. You move through the rooms like a ghost of mercy, your habit stained with sweat and blood and the dark fluids of dying bodies. And in the midst of this horror, you understand the true purpose of your silence. It is not to erase yourself. It is to make space for others. When Sister Claire, she of the secret humming, begins to cough blood, you sit with her through the night. She cannot speak, but she grips your hand with surprising strength. In her eyes you see not fear, but gratitude for your presence, for your stillness, for the fact that you did not look away. She dies at dawn. You close her eyes, wash her face, and tuck the wooden bird, long kept in your herb chest, into her folded hands. No one questions it. In the face of death, small rebellions become acts of love. After the worst passes, after 37 nuns are buried in the cloister garth, after the abbess herself succumbs, you are asked to take on a new duty. Not as infirmarian, that role falls to a younger sister, but as keeper of the memoria. It is not an official title. There is no ceremony. But one morning, the new abbess, her face still drawn from grief, places a blank ledger in your hands. Write what we have lost, she says quietly. Not just names, but who they were. And so, for the first time in your life, you are given permission to remember aloud, even if only on paper. You begin carefully, humbly. Sister Odile, blind, gentle, loved the sound of rain. Sister Claire sang without words, carved birds from pear wood. Brother Anselm kept bees, left honey for the sick. You do not write your own name, not yet. But you include the hazelnut. You include the light in the arcade at 3 o'clock. You include the list you found, and the line you added. This ledger is never shown to outsiders. It is not part of the official abbey records. It is kept in a chest beneath your pallet, wrapped in linen. But it exists. And in a world that values only the grand and the recorded, this quiet act of preservation is revolutionary. Years pass. The abbey rebuilds. New novices arrive, wide-eyed and chattering, quickly hushed by the weight of the rule. You teach them to dry herbs, to scrub stone, to move without noise. But you also teach them to notice. See how the mint curls at the edges when it's ready, you say. Hear how the wind changes when rain is coming. They listen. And in their eyes you see the same flicker you once felt, the quiet awakening of self within surrender. You never leave the abbey. You never see the sea, or a city larger than Dijon, or the face of a child you might have borne. But you live to be 73. On your deathbed, a young lay sister, whom you taught to read the language of plants, presses a single dried violet into your hand. You do not ask where she found it. You simply close your fingers around it and smile. When you die, they bury you in the cloister, near Sister Odile. No stone marks your grave. Lay sisters rarely receive them. But the new infirmarian keeps your ledger. And in time, she adds your name. Sister Agnès remembered the taste of apples, the weight of small things, and the silence between bells. Centuries later, historians will study the grand chronicles of medieval monasteries, the papal decrees, the land grants, the theological debates. But they will miss the true heart of monastic life, not in the soaring chants, but in the quiet hands that kept the candles lit, the herbs dried, the sick comforted. Your life left no monument, but it left ripples. In our own time, we chase visibility, likes, followers, personal brands. We fear being forgotten. Yet the most enduring legacies are often the quietest. The teacher who noticed a struggling student, the nurse who held a hand at 3 a.m., the neighbor who left soup on a doorstep during hard times. Like you, they did not seek glory. They simply showed up. They paid attention. They remembered. And in a world that shouts, sometimes the most radical act is to be still and to see. Now, as the last bell of the day echoes through the stone halls, you let your breath slow. The candle flickers. The forest outside sighs. The silence is not empty. It is full of memory, of care, of lives lived with quiet grace. Close your eyes. Let the violets bloom in your palm. Let the bells fade into the distance. Let the list grow, even in the dark. You were seen. You mattered. You are remembered. Sleep now, sister. Vespers is over. Compline has begun. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 1851, in a cramped back bedroom of a terraced house in Manchester, England. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint, sour tang of yesterday's boiled cabbage clinging to the walls. Your mattress, a thin sack stuffed with straw rustles as you shift, and your bare feet immediately recoil from the icy floorboards. Outside, the factory whistle has already blown, a long, shrill shriek that slices through the fog like a blade. It's 30 a.m. You are Thomas Wilkins, age 9, and you are already late. You scramble up, your small hands fumbling with the buttons of your threadbare shirt. There's no time to wash. Water must be carried from the communal pump in the yard, and your mother is already at the mill, her shift having started an hour ago. Your younger sister, Eliza, stirs on the pallet beside you, her face pale and smudged with sleep. Tommy, she whispers, her voice thin as thread. Shh, you say, pulling on your patched trousers. Go back to sleep. But she won't. She never does. Not since the baby died last winter, from a cough that wouldn't quit, in a room that never warmed. Now she wakes at every sound, every silence. You tiptoe to the door, open it just enough to peek into the hallway. The house is quiet. Your older brothers are already at the foundry. Your father at the docks. Only Mrs. Gable, the widow next door, shuffles past with a bucket, her knuckles white from the cold. She gives you a nod. You nod back. No words. Words cost energy, and energy is rationed like sugar. You slip downstairs, careful not to wake the lodgers crammed into the parlour, 2 seamstresses and a railway clerk, all paying 6pence a week for a corner of floor and a shared blanket. Their breathing is shallow, exhausted. Like yours. In the scullery, you find half a hunk of yesterday's bread on the shelf. You break off a piece for Eliza, wrap it in a scrap of cloth, and tuck it under your coat. The rest you eat dry, chewing slowly to make it last. There's no butter, no jam, just bread, dense, grey, and slightly stale. But it's food, and food is never guaranteed. By 5:50 you're out the door, joining the stream of children flowing toward the cotton mill on the edge of town. They're all like you, small, pale, dressed in hand-me-downs 2 sizes too big or too small. Some carry lunch pails, most don't. You pass a newsboy shouting about the great exhibition in London, Prince Albert, Crystal Palaces, wonders from India. But the words mean nothing to you. Wonders don't feed families. Work does. The mill looms ahead, a monstrous brick fortress belching black smoke into the dawn sky. Its windows are narrow, grimy, unblinking. As you approach, the foreman, Mr. Hargrove, with his brass watch chain and tobacco-stained teeth, stands at the gate, ticking names off a clipboard. "Wilkins," he barks as you near. "Here, sir. You're late." "No, sir. The whistle just—" "Late," he repeats, making a mark. "Halfpenny docked." Your stomach drops. Half a penny is 2 loaves of bread, or a 1/4 pound of tallow for the lamp, or a dose of cough syrup for Eliza. You say nothing. Arguing means a cuff to the ear, or worse, being sent home without pay. And no pay means no rent. No rent means the street. Inside, the noise hits you like a physical blow. The looms, hundreds of them, clatter, clank and shriek in a deafening symphony of iron and steam. The air is hot, thick with cotton dust that coats your tongue, your eyelashes, the inside of your nose. You've been told it's called "Kiss Me Quick" by the older workers. A joke, but it's not funny when your chest tightens every winter, when you wake coughing up grey phlegm. Your station is at Loom 47, where you spend 10 hours, sometimes 12, if orders are behind, piecing broken threads, clearing jams, oiling gears with a rag dipped in foul-smelling grease. Your fingers are already calloused, your nails split and blackened. Last week you lost the tip of your left pinky to a shuttle that flew loose. You wrapped it in a handkerchief, tied it tight, and kept working. The foreman gave you a grudging nod. Good lad. No fuss. Fuss is weakness. Weakness is dismissal. At noon, you get 20 minutes for dinner. You sit on a crate in the yard, unwrapping your bread. A rat scurries past, bold as brass. You don't shoo it away. You've seen boys kicked for wasting time on nonsense. You eat quickly, eyes down, ears tuned to the whistle that will call you back. Around you, children as young as 6 shuffle past, their faces blank with fatigue. Some are barefoot, even in November. One boy, Jimmy, from your street, has a rash across his neck from the oil. You won't scratch it. Scratching draws attention. Attention draws punishment.
School? You've heard of it. There's a raggedy building near the church where a stern man teaches the alphabet to a handful of children whose parents can afford to lose their wages. You went twice, when you were 6. Then the mill needed more hands, and your father said, "Reading won't fill bellies, son." He wasn't wrong. By 6 o'clock, your shift ends. You walk home in the dark, your legs trembling, your head pounding from the noise. Eliza is waiting at the door, her eyes wide. "Did you bring it?" she asks. You hand her the bread. She devours it in 3 bites. Inside, the fire is out. Your mother isn't back yet. Her shift runs until 7. You light the lamp with the last of the tallow, then sit on the floor, rubbing your feet to bring back feeling. Eliza curls against you, her small body radiating cold. You think of the great exhibition, of crystal palaces, of wonders. And you wonder, is there a world where children don't have to be tired? The weeks blur into a grey monotony of looms, lint, and lamplight. Winter deepens. Frost feathers the inside of your single window pane, and the damp in the walls turns to ice by morning. Your mother comes home later each night, her fingers stiff and red from handling wet yarn in unheated rooms. She coughs, a wet rattling sound that keeps you awake long after she's fallen asleep on the floor beside Eliza. You've stopped counting the days until Sunday. Sundays aren't rest, they're chores. Hauling water, mending clothes, standing in line at the parish relief office for a sack of oatmeal or a lump of coal. Church is mandatory, your father insists. But the sermons about patience and obedience feel like another kind of labor. You sit on the hard pew, your back aching, your mind drifting to the warmth of the mill's boiler room, of all places. At least there, the heat is honest. At the mill, the pace quickens. Orders from America are pouring in, cotton is king, and Manchester is its throne. Mr. Hargrove posts new rules on the bulletin board. No talking, no sitting, no more than 2 bathroom breaks per shift. A boy named Ned is caught napping behind a bale of raw cotton. He's flogged with a leather strap in front of everyone. No one cries out. No one looks away. You learn to sleep standing up, your head nodding forward for just a second at a time, your body swaying like a reed in wind. Your hands are now a map of your labor, blisters turned to calluses, cuts sealed over with grime, knuckles swollen from cold. You've developed a twitch in your left eye, a nervous tic from squinting at broken threads in the dim light. The doctor, a man who visits the mill once a month, paid by the owners, calls it loom fatigue. He prescribes cod liver oil and more discipline. You get neither. But it's not just the body that wears down. It's the mind. You've begun to forget things. The color of grass in summer, the sound of birdsong, the feeling of running just for joy, not because you're late. Your dreams are filled with clattering looms and shouting foremen. Once, you dreamed you were a shuttle, flying back and forth, until your edges wore smooth and you vanished into the cloth. At home, Eliza grows quieter. She doesn't ask for bread anymore. She just watches you with large, hollow eyes, as if waiting for you to fail. You find her one afternoon pressing her ear to the wall, listening to the neighbors' children laugh. When she sees you, she pulls away quickly, ashamed. You want to tell her it's all right, that one day, things will be different. But you don't believe it yourself. Then, in February, something changes. A woman appears at the mill gate. She's not a worker, not a vendor. She wears a plain but clean dress, a bonnet tied neatly under her chin, and carries a leather satchel. She speaks to Mr. Hargrove in a calm, firm voice. He scowls but doesn't turn her away. Later, you hear the older girls whispering. "It's a factory inspector, from London, sent by Parliament." You don't know what that means, but the next day, she's back walking the aisles, watching, taking notes. She stops at your loom. "How old are you, boy?" she asks. "9, ma'am." "And how many hours do you work?" You hesitate, saying 12 might get the mill in trouble. Getting the mill in trouble might get you fired, but lying feels dangerous too. 10, you say carefully. Sometimes 11. She studies your hands. Do you go to school? No, ma'am. She nods, writes something in her book, and moves on. You expect punishment, but none comes. Instead, a week later, a notice appears. All children under 10 must present proof of age or be removed from employment. Panic ripples through the mill. Parents scramble for baptismal records, many lost, many never made. Some boys lie, claiming to be older. Others vanish overnight, sent to farms or distant relatives. You're one of the lucky ones. Your mother finds your christening certificate tucked in the family Bible, a book you've never seen opened. You're allowed to stay. But the inspector's visit lingers like a ghost. For the first time, someone from the outside world has looked at you. Not as a pair of hands, not as a cost of production, but as a child. The idea is so strange it feels like a fever dream. That Sunday, while waiting in line for parish coal, you overhear two women talking. They say there's a new law coming, one says. Children under 9 can't work in mills at all, and those that do must have schooling. Bah, the other snorts. Laws don't feed families, wages do. You say nothing. But that night, as you rub Eliza's cold feet, you wonder, what if she never has to step inside a mill? What if she learns to read? What if she dreams of crystal palaces and actually sees one? The thought is dangerous. Hope is a luxury you can't afford, and yet, it takes root. In March, the mill cuts hours, orders slow. Mr. Hargrove glares at everyone, as if their exhaustion is to blame. You're sent home early 3 days in a row. No pay for those hours. Your mother sells her good shawl. You skip meals so Eliza can eat. One evening, you find her crying silently in the corner. I'm sorry, she whispers. I'm sorry I'm so hungry. You pull her close. It's not your fault, you say. And for the first time you mean it. Not just to her, but to yourself. You didn't choose this life. No child does. And yet, every day, you show up. You endure. You protect what little light remains in your sister's eyes. But the question gnaws at you, louder than hunger, sharper than the loom's shriek. If childhood is supposed to be a time of play, of learning, of wonder, then what are you? And more terrifyingly, will you ever get it back? The year 1851 passes. The Great Exhibition in London dazzles the world with steam engines, telegraphs, and glass palaces, symbols of an empire at its zenith. But in Manchester, nothing changes overnight. The looms still clatter, the foreman still docks wages, children still work until their bones ache and their eyes blur. Yet something has shifted, not in the mills, but in the air. A slow, quiet turning, like the first creak of a great wheel beginning to move. Parliament passes the Factory Act of 1847, limiting the workday for women and children to 10 hours. Enforcement is patchy, corruption common, and loopholes wide. But the law exists. And with it, the idea takes hold. Children are not small adults. They are not machines. They deserve protection. You don't benefit much at first. At 10 years old, you're still expected to work full shifts. But the inspector returns twice more that year. Each time, she watches longer, asks more questions, and, once, gives you a small orange. You eat it in secret, savoring the burst of sweetness like a sacrament. You save the peel for Eliza. By 1853, new rules are enforced more strictly. Children under 11 must attend school for at least 3 hours a day if employed. A ragged school opens in a converted warehouse near the canal. You're allowed to attend 2 afternoons a week, your wages docked, of course, but your mother insists. You'll learn your letters, she says, her voice firm despite her cough, so you won't be trapped like us. The classroom is cold, the bench is hard, the teacher stern. But for those 3 hours, the noise of the loom fades. You learn to write your name, Thomas Wilkins, in careful, uneven script. You trace the letters again and again, as if proving you exist beyond the mill's ledger. You learn that the world is round, that rivers flow to the sea, that there are places where snow never falls. It's not magic, but it feels close. Eliza, now 7, is spared the mill entirely. She goes to school every day. You see her sometimes at recess, skipping rope with other girls, her cheeks pink with cold and laughter. The sight stuns you. You didn't know she could laugh like that. You work until you're 14. By then your frame has filled out, your hands are permanently scarred, and your hearing is dulled by years of clatter. But you've saved penny by hidden penny, a small sum in a tin under the floorboard. Not enough to buy freedom, but enough to choose your next step. You leave the mill not with fanfare, but quietly, on a Tuesday in spring. Mr. Hargrove barely looks up from his ledger. Next he mutters as you hand in your pass. You become a clerk's assistant at a cotton brokerage. Low pay, long hours, but no looms, no lint, no risk of losing fingers to flying shuttles. You wear a collar. You carry a pen. And every evening, you walk past the mill without flinching. Years later, you marry a seamstress named Clara. You have 2 children. You insist they go to school. All of it, not just 3 hours. You read to them at night, your voice rough but steady, from books you buy second-hand. When your son asks what a loom is, you hesitate, then tell him it's a machine that weaves cloth. You don't mention the noise, the dust, the way it stole your childhood one thread at a time. You never speak publicly about your years in the mill. There are no memoirs, no speeches. But you vote when the Reform Acts finally allow men like you a voice. And you always support candidates who promise better schools, safer factories, shorter hours for children. Because you know the truth. The Industrial Revolution wasn't powered only by steam and iron. It was powered by small hands. Historians will celebrate the inventors, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, but they'll rarely mention the thousands of Thomases and Elizas whose labor built the empire's wealth while their own lives were worn thin as thread. Today, child labor is illegal in most of the world, but not everywhere. In garment factories, cobalt mines, cocoa farms, children still work long hours in dangerous conditions, their childhoods traded for pennies. And even in wealthy nations, poverty forces impossible choices: school or survival, rest or rent. Your story is not unique. It is universal. It is the quiet tragedy of systems that value production over people, and the quiet resilience of those who endure them. One evening, late in life, you take your grandson to the Manchester Museum. He stops before a display of Victorian mill artifacts: a shuttle, a spindle, a child's shoe, tiny and worn. "Did you ever see one of these?" he asks. You nod. You don't say more. But as you walk home, hand in his small one, you feel the ghost of your 9-year-old self walking beside you, tired, hungry, but still here. Still here. Now, as the gas lights flicker on in the streets outside, you let your breath slow. The looms are silent. The whistle has blown for the last time. Your hands, though scarred, are at rest. Close your eyes. Let the cotton dust settle. Let the ache in your bones soften. Let the child you were finally sleep. You made it. Not unbroken, but whole enough. And that is victory enough. Rest now, Thomas. The shift is over. The future is there. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 2560 BCE, on the sun-baked plateau of Giza, just west of the Nile River. The air is already warm, though dawn has only just broken. A pale gold light spilling over the eastern dunes, casting long shadows across the desert floor. You lie on a reed mat in a cramped mud brick barracks, your body stiff from yesterday's labor, your throat dry with dust. Around you, dozens of other men stir in the dim light, coughing, stretching, muttering prayers to Ptah, the craftsman god, or to Hathor, lady of sustenance. You are Khaimwaset, a stone hauler from the nome of Heracleopolis, conscripted for the royal labor rotation 3 months ago. You are not a slave, not in the way later ages will imagine. You are a corvée laborer, a free Egyptian man fulfilling your annual duty to the state, just as your father and grandfather did before you. In exchange, you receive food, shelter, and the promise of divine favor. To build the pharaoh's tomb is to serve the cosmic order itself. Ma'at. But right now, none of that feels real. All you feel is the ache in your shoulders, the grit between your toes, and the hollow gnawing in your belly that tells you breakfast is late. You rise, wrap a linen kilt around your waist, and step outside into the courtyard. The camp is stirring to life. Smoke curls from communal ovens. Men queue at the water trough, splashing their faces, rinsing dust from their eyes. A scribe sits under a lean-to, checking his papyrus roll against a wooden tablet, ticking off names with a reed pen. You join the line for bread. The ration is simple: 2 loaves of coarse emmer wheat bread, a handful of onions, and a small jug of beer, thick, sour, and nutritious, more porridge than drink. You eat quickly, sitting on your heels in the dust. The bread is gritty with sand, but it's filling. The beer settles your stomach. You don't complain. Complaining won't shorten the day, and the day is long. By sunrise, the work begins. You belong to Gang 7 of the North Quarry Team, 40 men assigned to haul limestone blocks from the nearby Tora quarries to the rising pyramid of Khufu. Each block weighs 2.5 tons. You don't lift them. No human could. Instead, you and your team drag them on wooden sledges across lubricated causeways, paths slicked with water or, when available, a slurry of Nile mud. It takes perfect coordination. One misstep, one rope slipping, and a man can be crushed beneath a corner. You've seen it happen. Last week, a hauler named Neferhotep slipped on wet stone. The sledge rolled over his leg. The medics set the bone, bound it with linen and resin, and sent him to the infirmary tent. You don't know if he'll walk again, but you do know he'll still be fed. The state cares for its workers, because it needs them. The work is rhythmic, brutal, and strangely communal. There's no overseer cracking a whip. That's a myth from later invaders who couldn't fathom free men building monuments without coercion. Instead, your foreman, a veteran named Seni, stands at the front, chanting a steady cadence. Heave and pull, heave and pull. You lean into the rope, your bare feet digging into the packed earth, your muscles burning with effort. Sweat pours down your back, instantly drying in the desert air. At midday, the sun is merciless. You retreat to a shaded lean-to for the hottest hours. This is when the real life of the camp unfolds. Men mend sandals, play senet with knuckle bones, share stories of home. You write a letter on a pottery shard, a ostrakon, to your wife Merit. The rations are good, the beer is plentiful. Tell little Ipi his father hauls stone for the Horus Khufu. We are well. You don't mention the blisters, the back pain, the dreams of your fields lying fallow while you're away. Because this is your duty, and duty is honor. In the afternoon, you return to the causeway. Today, your team is moving a casing stone, fine white Tora limestone meant for the pyramid's outer layer. These blocks are smoother, heavier, more precious. You handle them with reverence. One scratch, and the stone is ruined. The artisans who will polish it later are unforgiving. As the sun dips low, casting the pyramid in long dramatic shadow. The work stops. You wash in a basin of Nile water, cool, blessedly clean, and return to the barracks. Dinner is fish stew with lentils, served in clay bowls. You eat with your hands, talking quietly with your tent mates about the progress. The pyramid is now 80 cubits high, only a few more years to go. Later, you lie on your mat, staring up at the roof of reeds and mud. The stars emerge, Sirius, Orion, the imperishable ones. You think of your village, your children, the barley harvest you'll miss. But you also think of the pyramid. How it will stand when you are dust. How your name may never be carved on it, but your hands helped shape eternity. And yet, a quiet question lingers in the desert night. If you build a monument to a god king, who remembers the hands that built it? The weeks turn into months. The pyramid rises, course by course, its silhouette sharpening against the sky like a blade drawn from the earth. You've grown leaner, stronger, your skin permanently bronzed by the sun, your palms hardened into leather. The initial exhaustion has given way to a grim rhythm: work, eat, sleep, repeat. But within that rhythm, a community has taken root. You've learned the names of every man in your gang. There's Hori, the joker from Memphis, who mimics the scribe's nasal tones to make you laugh during breaks. There's Jedi, the quiet carpenter from Abydos, who carves tiny amulets of bez for the men to wear under their kilts for protection. And there's young Einaferti, barely 16, who still flinches at the sound of falling stone but hauls his share without complaint. This is not slavery, but it is not freedom either. You are bound by obligation, not chains. The corvée system is woven into the fabric of Egyptian life. Every year, during the Ikhet, the inundation season, when the Nile floods and farming halts, able-bodied men are called to serve the state. Some build canals, some repair dikes, some, like you, build tombs for the divine pharaoh. It is your tax, paid in sweat instead of grain. And the state pays you back, in bread, beer, fish, and dignity. Archaeologists centuries from now will find your settlement buried under sand, barracks, bakeries, breweries, even a hospital. They'll uncover skeletons with healed fractures, signs of medical care, and joints worn from labor, but not from malnutrition. Your teeth will show wear from gritty bread, yes, but also evidence of a protein-rich diet. You were not starved. You were sustained. But sustenance is not the same as choice. One evening, after dinner, a rumor spreads through the camp. A gang from the south has refused to work. They say the rations have been cut, the beer watered down. They demand to speak to the vizier's representative. Tension crackles like dry reeds. You've heard of strikes before. In the reign of Pepi II, laborers at the mortuary temple went on hunger strike over delayed grain shipments. They won. But that was a different time. Khufu's reign is firm, his vision absolute. The next morning, the southern gang is gone. Not punished, just reassigned. Sent to dig foundation trenches in the Valley Temple, a less prestigious task. A quiet message: dissent is tolerated, but not rewarded. You say nothing. You tie your rope. You haul your stone. Still, the instant lingers. For the first time, you wonder, what if you refused? What if you walked back to Heracleopolis and tended your fields instead? The thought is treasonous. Not against the king, but against Ma'at, the cosmic balance. To shirk your duty is to invite chaos, and chaos is the enemy of all life. Yet, in the quiet hours before sleep, you allow yourself a different dream, not of rebellion, but of recognition. You've seen the artisans carve hieroglyphs into the inner chambers, prayers for the king's soul, spells for his journey through the Duat. But no one writes your name. No one will know that Chaim Wasset of Heracleopolis hauled the block that became the pharaoh's false door. Your labor is essential and invisible. One afternoon, while waiting for a new sledge to be repaired, you notice something unusual. On a discarded limestone flake near the mason's yard, someone has scratched a crude drawing. A man with arms raised, beside a symbol that looks like a bird. Beneath it, a name, Nefer the Holler. Your breath catches. It's not official, it's not sanctioned, but it's there, a mark, a whisper of self in a world of collective duty. That night, when no one is looking, you take a copper chisel from the tool pile, just for a moment, and press your own name into a soft block near the edge of the work site. Chaim Wasset. Not in hieroglyphs. Your literacy is limited to tally marks and simple signs, but in the cursive hand used by laborers. It will be buried under the next course. No one will see it, but you know it's there. This is your quiet rebellion, not refusal, but remembrance. As the season turns, the work intensifies. The pyramid nears completion. The outer casing stones are being fitted, gleaming white under the sun, so polished they reflect the sky. You'll never see it finished. Your rotation ends in 2 weeks. You'll return home just before the barley harvest. But before you go, something unexpected happens. The overseer calls your gang forward, not for punishment, for honor. You've been selected to help place one of the final capstones on the subsidiary Queen's Pyramid. It's a small task, but symbolic. Only trusted men are chosen. On the appointed day, you climb the ramp, wooden, steep, lined with ropes, and stand near the summit, the wind tugging at your kilt. Below, the desert stretches endlessly. The Nile glints like a silver thread. For a moment, you feel not like a laborer, but like a participant in something vast, sacred, eternal. You help guide the stone into place. It settles with a soft thud. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just work. Well done. Back on the ground, Seni claps you on the shoulder. You've earned your rest, Chaim Wasset. You nod, but as you walk back to the barracks, you realize rest isn't what you want. You want to be known. Not as a hero, not as a rebel, just as a man who was here, who did his part, who mattered. And yet, history will forget you. Or so you think. You return home just as the barley turns gold in the fields. Your wife Merit weeps when she sees you. Not from sorrow, but relief. Your son Epi, now 6, stares at you as if you've become a stranger. Taller, leaner, your voice rougher from shouting over wind and stone. But when you lift him onto your shoulders, he laughs, the same bright sound you carried in your heart across the desert. Life resumes. You plow, sow, irrigate. You attend local festivals. You pay your taxes in grain. You never speak much of Giza. When neighbors ask, you say only, the work was hard. The rations were fair. The king's house rises. That is enough. Years pass. Khufu dies. His son builds his own pyramid at Abbasia. You are not called again. Your name is not on the next labor roster. Perhaps you're too old. Perhaps your village's quota is filled. You don't mind. Your body still aches in the damp, and your dreams are quieter now. You live to be 63. An old man by Egyptian standards. On your deathbed, your children gather. You whisper instructions for your burial. A simple shaft tomb near the family plot. A stela with your name and titles. Chaim Wasset, Holler of Stone, servant of Ma'at. No grandeur. No gold. Just memory. They honor your wish.
Your tomb is modest, your coffin plain, but your name is carved clearly by your son, who learned scribing from the village priest. And beside it, he adds a small relief. A man hauling a stone on a sledge, the sun above, the Nile in the distance. It is not the Great Pyramid, but it is yours.
Centuries pass. Dynasties rise and fall. The white casing stones of Khufu's pyramid are stripped away by later builders. Sand swallows the workers' village. Your name fades from living memory. But in 1990, archaeologists uncover the lost city of the pyramid builders, bakeries, breweries, dormitories, even medical facilities. Among the ruins, they find graffiti on stone blocks, friends of Khufu drunkards of Menkora, the Green Gang, and on a limestone flake near the southern causeway, a single name, faint but legible. Khaemwaset. Not a king, not a god, just a man. Modern scholars now agree the pyramids were not built by slaves, but by skilled laborers, rotated in from villages across Egypt, fed, housed, and honored for their service. They were not whipped into submission. They were organized, motivated, and proud. Their skeletons show healed injuries, balanced diets, and signs of communal care. They were not invisible. They were simply forgotten until the earth gave them back. Today, when tourists stand before the Great Pyramid, they marvel at its scale, its precision, its mystery. Few think of the thousands of hands that shaped it. Men who missed their children's first steps, who carried blisters like badges, who wrote love notes on pottery shards and carved their names in secret. But you were there, and your work endures. In our own time, we still build monuments, skyscrapers, bridges, digital empires, on the labor of unseen hands. Construction workers, coders, cleaners, delivery drivers. Their names won't grace plaques or headlines, but without them, the world would crumble. Your story reminds us that greatness is never the work of one. It is the sum of many, quiet, tired, essential. Now, as the desert wind sighs over Giza, carrying grains of sand across the plateau, you let your breath slow. The sun sets behind the pyramid, casting its shadow like a benediction. The stars emerge. Orion, Sirius, the eternal ones. Close your eyes. Let the rope slip from your hands. Let the dust settle on your kilt. Let your name, once whispered in the dark, rise again, not in stone, but in memory. You were not a slave. You were not a footnote. You were a builder of eternity. Rest now, Khaemwaset. The pyramid stands, and so do you.